Today, a new documentary drops on Apple TV+, and it is one that will move you whether you lived through the Vietnam War or not. It is a unique series narrated by Ethan Hawke, and it combines first-person testimony and immersive archival footage to tell the stories of those who lived through the war that changed America. My next guest did live through that war and reported on it as ABC News' first female foreign correspondent. We'd like to welcome her now, Hilary Brown, to Great Day, Washington. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure to be here, Helen.
This is amazing. I mean, we showed some of the video from it. There is a ton of video that went into these 6 episodes.
Yes, extraordinary.
What will people be seeing when they tune in?
Well, they'll be seeing individuals who were involved in the war at one level or another. So it would be a conscript or an officer or a medic or a reporter, and they'll see them then in the 60s and 70s when the war went on, and then now you see them in the present day and looking back on how they think about it and feel about it and so on. But the remarkable thing is the extent of the archive video. It's absolutely extraordinary. And honestly, Ellen, I think it should be required viewing for anybody, and certainly for students of history or for military students of military history. It's absolutely compelling. It's a very, very unique series.
Well, it's eye-opening, and it's funny, we have this footage, it's here, but I've never seen it presented in a way like this. The first-person accounts are also a big part of it. Yeah. You're in episode 6. What is that episode about?
That is about the end, the fall of Saigon, which came at the end of April 1975, and that was the North Vietnamese Army had advanced with lightning speed from the north down to the south to take Saigon. This was what was called the final offensive, which they thought, the North Vietnamese thought, would take 2 years, and it took 6 weeks. Wow. They took 8 provinces in 21 days. Why? Because the South Vietnamese Army, the ARVN, just disintegrated. And why? Because it no longer had American combat troops. Under the terms of the Paris Peace Accord in 1973, that was 2 years before, the U.S. withdrew combat forces. So the ARVN had to do much more with much less. And also they had problems of, they were very demoralized. There's a very high desertion rate, very high corruption rate among the officers. The officers quite often desert their men, and the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, on the other hand, and the Viet Cong, which was the guerrilla force, the communist guerrilla force in South Vietnam, were extremely motivated. They operated like fish in the water. They knew how to operate in the terrain, and so really, the end of that war was only a matter of time. The end of the war and the reunification of the country as a single communist country.
Yeah, and speaking of, we said it in the introduction, it changed America as well after that war. How, or what would you say to people who aren't as aware of what happened during the Vietnam War, who might be interested in seeing this? That was maybe one of the biggest lessons that you took away.
Well, it changed America. I mean, we assume it changed America because you had, after the war, after the fall of Saigon, and this extraordinary evacuation by helicopter from the roof of the American embassy. 7,000 people were moved by chopper in the space of 19 hours without a single loss of civilian life, which was extraordinary. I mean, as a military operation, it was quite extraordinary. But after that, you had what they called the Vietnam syndrome. People didn't want to know about Vietnam. They just didn't want to know, didn't want to hear. And initially it appeared that America would no longer get involved in foreign wars, in countries about which they know very little, and whose forms of government aren't necessarily a threat to America's national security. But inevitably, by 1991, we were involved in the 91 Gulf War. That was a coalition with other Western countries to drive the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. You remember they invaded Kuwait. But then the worst was the invasion and occupation of Iraq in 2003. Which lasted for 7 years. Now the death toll wasn't nearly as high. It was something like 4,500 men died, but many, many were terribly injured, from that war by roadside bombs. But they survived the injuries, but with awful brain injuries and so on. So, you know, the lesson is really never learned. So watch this series, and it may remind you again.
I like what you said. Yes, watch this, learn our history, learn from it. The documentary, Vietnam, the War That Changed America, is out now on Apple TV+. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.